Well, for me, the word Christianity, going back to the beginning, I think we've kind of lost the fact that what it really meant to be a Christian was that you were like Christ, that we were Christ-like. And so that's got to be the filter. And in my lifestyle every day, I'm looking to be who God would be in character to whoever I'm dealing with in my life. Not just on the stage, but in my family, in my relationships, and always measuring myself by what would Jesus do? WWJD. I was like, what would Jesus do right now? What would he say? So, that Christianity for me is a lot more than religion. It's a lot more than the churchy stuff that we do, but it's the relationship. And how do I fit that into all the distractions that happen around us, the cares of the world and life and being a father and all the stuff, living in America.
Yeah.
Trying to be a Christian is much different than living in another part of the world than being a Christian. So, but I find my intimacy, my prayer life, my relationship is what keeps me centered.
Was there a moment in your life where, like, maybe it clicked? Maybe you did the things. Maybe, you saw your parents or saw, figures like, well, this is what it looks like to be a Christian. But maybe that was not fulfillment.
Well, I remember in the early days, I was in my young 20s, and I was starting what I believed to be an evangelistic ministry. And so I didn't have any models in relationship that what I would call evangelists or revivalists would be a word I like today better, missionary revivalist. I said, I see the guys on TV. My mom, would have Billy Graham crusades on the TV when I was a kid, and I remember her having that on sometimes. And, me looking at that, and then, me looking at Christian TV, guys that would be doing stuff, that they would call outreaches or crusades or festivals or whatever. And I looked at that and I went, okay, that's what I'm called to. I don't know how to get there, but... And then I thought in the beginning I had to emulate the suit, and I had the white hair at one time, and I had a real clean look because that's what I saw on TV. So I adapted myself in my early 20s to thinking the white suit and the choir and was to equal the success I saw portrayed on TV. And then it just, for me, became empty because I've never felt like I was real and authentic and vulnerable. I felt like I was manufacturing some kind of, put the cart before the horse to try to get the results and emulate, And all that fell apart for me in my late 20s, and I decided to embrace me with the tattoos and with the beards and I didn't grow up around church. I grew up around outlaw biker gangs. I didn't grow up in a religious way. Yeah. My mom might have had some Billy Graham crusades on the TV, I remember, but she hated religion. But she somehow identified that even back then, Billy Graham wasn't her idea of the religion that hurt her, growing up in a strict denominational type church and being made to go to church and behave a certain way. And she somehow felt Billy didn't do that. So that was my only expression growing up of Christianity. Other than that, it was my dad and I at 11 years old getting drunk together and going to biker parties and, growing up around everything anti-God. Yeah. And so when I, had my experience where I was awakened in the sense of, hey, Jesus is real and he's my Lord and Savior. Once I became into the church, it immediately was, you got to clean up, you got to take out all your piercings, you got to cut your hair, we're going to put you in a Bible school, you're going to find your wife. And it was a very much cookie cutter. Yeah. And I always fought against the system of religion. I always fought against, how can I just be me? It's not what it's what comes out of the heart, not the externals. And so I always struggled with that. How do I fit into the church? And how do I fit the Christianity from 2,000 years ago into the church and yet be me and be real so it's authentic gospel? I've always been on that line,
Yeah. I really feel like, so many times, like I was a worship, pastor for many years growing up. And it was always a struggle of doing church and doing what was expected every week, but also looking out in the crowd and you see so many people that you're like, man, I know they're a pastor. I know they're an evangelist. I know they're a missionary. I know God's put gifts inside of them, but there was not really that moment to really mine out the gifts. Sure. It's because you feel so many times you're like, well, we got to just do what we're doing, and I don't really have time to do the one-on-one. And I just started finding God, always, it was just never failed. It was like I would just ironically be placed face to face like this with somebody, and it's like God's like, "What are you gonna do about it?" Yeah. It's like, what? I mean, you're waiting for somebody else to do it. Yeah. What are you gonna do about it? And it's just amazing to me just how, even just looking at somebody who's like, "I believe in you. I believe God's called you for more. I mean, I know you see that being a pastor, like, oh, like the daunting task of what that is, but like, you are a pastor.
Yeah.
Like, I think just to speak life into people and see it resonate, and then watch them walk that out in their life, not because of a label or not because of a degree. It's literally just like, no, Christ literally came and
I
birthed
think that
life.
becomes more important as the years go by. Like, I think of myself feeling called and starting ministry in my early 20s compared to here I am at 41. And now I'm a father and I have, 5 kids. But spiritually now, I've done meetings with just a handful. I've done meetings in houses. I've done meetings in convention centers. I've done meetings in stadiums, in the open field. So, okay, all that's behind me. In a sense, if you were to measure it by the pinnacle of success, however you may want to call what is success in ministry, my dreams from when I felt like I'm called to go into all the world and preach the gospel, I've done a lot of that. And so now I look at myself and I go, I'm not so concerned about doing that, because that 3-day meeting or conference is no longer the measurement of the impact of the transformation. And so I have to do and look different. If I could multiply myself in 1,000 people and they all go out and do what I did in my 20s, I'd be way more successful. So you have to be intentional about discipleship, looking for the one that you can say, I believe in you, I see your gift, and I'm going to give you platform, and I'm going to be behind you. So I think that changes with maturity, and the church needs to constantly be focused on not guarding and holding on to our pulpits and kingdoms that we built, but being sure that we're empowering others to move in whatever their gifts and talents are.
Absolutely, and that takes a tremendous amount of humility. And it's one thing I've found is like humility is something that's learned. It's not really taught. It's like, oh, I can be humble, sure, but it's not until you're like on your face and you're like, oh man.
You have to lose it all sometimes, and I, for one, is somebody that's lost it all multiple times. To fall back on the grace of God.
Yeah.
Fall on the rock and be broken, or the rock fall on you and grind you to powder. So we have to either let ourselves fall on that grace of God and have Him put us together, or the rock falls on us, and that pride can be crushed. And the Lord knows how to bring down that.
Sure.
But I think the only way we can really be successful in humility is to be broken. Absolutely. And that's Lord knows how to break us. We know how to break ourselves sometimes, but the Lord knows how to heal us. Yeah. But He also knows how to break us.
That's awesome. And I feel like, my heart too is I was talking to a lot of these guys when on the road, and it's like, at the end, my agenda is people's lives transformed, not by me, not by a group, by Jesus, like encounter Jesus. Yeah. And I feel like I've sat with face to face with so many Christians that like I'm talking about the encounter I've had. Not this like kooky, weird, like just like he's like a friend, like he's an actual person, and they just like the lights aren't even on. How much more faith do you have to walk this out with zero encounter than, you know what I mean? Yeah. And it's like, it blows my mind though, some people, how they're really only clinging to faith. They have no connection at all.
See, encounter is everything we as a ministry do. Our whole ministry could be broken down to encounter and experience. I talked about Saul on the road to Damascus. I didn't grow up, like I told you, around any kind of church. So there was no, familiarity in the sense of what religion or Christianity was. I met Christ in my drug dealer's trailer, not looking for Christianity. So that encounter has never left me to this day. So religious forms, methods, and theologies change, come and go. Yeah. But that encounter I had is what brought me through to this day. Nobody could tell me, even in the face of death, that Jesus wasn't real. I've had way too many encounters. Now, your theology could change, your interpretations could change, your expression or denominations you associate could change. Yeah. But man, I could die for my faith because of my encounter, not because of my theologies, not because of the good spiritual fathers or the good churches I went to but because of my encounter. And if people don't have that as their anchor, they can't stand in the days that are here and the days that are ahead. But I think there's more and more of a generation. I'm much more of a positive guy about the church than a negative guy. I'm not a judgment guy. I think there's much more awakening to the encounter and embracing the need for encounter in Christianity today than there ever was before, say, to the Christianity of the 80s or the early 90s. I think the church is definitely on the quest of pursuing God now more than man and religion. I think there's been so much torn down already of building around one man of faith and power. That model doesn't work. Even in a day of Christianity, the way media and TV works, everybody can do Facebook. Everybody can have a voice. Everybody can have a TV show now, just because of Facebook or Periscope or social media. It wasn't like that 10, 12 years ago. You have to pay enormous amounts of money to be that 30-minute slot on some Christian television program. And that's what we all aspired to be. And then we just took what we saw from that. And now there's so many more forms that are, I just love that change that I see happening. I see a positive change in the 21st century kind of church because they're tired of dead religion and they're looking for encounter.
Absolutely. Well, with Quick Christianity, it's obviously a big, bold, kind of controversial subject. But at the end of the day, I greatly believe in the local church. I really believe in what Christ came to do and really breathe life into the family of God. And but I know a lot of times too, especially you feel like you hear a lot of people leaving churches. I'm done with this, I'm done with that. Which I think the posture of that heart is the initiation's good because it feels like they're actually asking God questions. Yeah. And I feel like God's big enough and He loves that. But at the same time, it's like I feel like
they're not leaving Jesus.
Yeah,
they're leaving church.
Church, yep.
And they're detoxing from church, the system. Mm-hmm. They're not detoxing necessarily from gathering with the believers.
Yeah.
And I think there's a freedom there to, when is it rebellion and they're just being rebellion and independent, or when is it when people are asking the question? Because they were hurt by one form of Jesus, or how we presented the gospel, but it wasn't really that. I have a lot of grace for people that are wounded like that and scattered.
That's awesome.
To find their place back and gathering with one another,
What's some advice you would give to a lot of pastors? Probably, I know they're struggling with the tension of do I leave the 99 for the one? And what does that look like? I mean, because I think a lot of people just wrestle with that conversation of
Well, I've lived it.
Yeah.
If I could say, I've lived the whole. I'm the one. I need somebody to leave the 99 to come after the one. In my early 30s, 32 years old, I was filling stadiums and arenas, doing stuff in America, and having thousands gather, to venues I would do everywhere. And then I had a crash. I went through a very public divorce, went through a 2.5-year season of restoration and healing. And I always thought when I left the church, in the sense of I'm not doing the ministry circuit thing or ministry full-time thing, I'm going to find Jesus again, and maybe I'll open a different type of business, or maybe I'll love God and just not do the church thing, the ministry thing. And I was rejected in one sense from the mainstream because, you had a divorce and you had a fall and you had a restoration. We don't know about what that really was. Some do, some don't. But I remember feeling like I was one of the 99 I'd left. Who's going to leave and come after me? Yeah. And few people that I called friends in life and ministry that I had built with did come after me because they didn't know how to lay aside the politics that can be involved, and they didn't know how to lay aside their own ministries to help me. It wasn't that they didn't want to. They didn't know how. Yeah. The pastors and the churches and the people that preached for me or shared platforms with me, they didn't know how to come down and go, well, how do we pick this guy back up now and help him get back in to the wider body of Christ? So I've lived that very question. Wow. And I think for me now, it's give the mercy I want to receive. So now I'm much more conscious of the one that's gone from the 99. Yeah. I think there was a time in my life where I was blinded by the busyness of my doing works for the Lord that I would have missed the one that was gone from the 99. So I think a lot of people are actually not intentional, but they're just blinded in the busyness of the works of ministry that they forget one left.
Wow.
So they don't know how to go after the one. And they don't know how to get off of the pinnacle of success and get down to the one anymore, because it's been so long since they've been there themselves, especially if you've had any success in what we call ministry.
Man, that's so good. Yeah, it's very similar to me. I remember, I have 3 boys, but going through that journey of being a father as well. My father, which was a pastor, spiritual mentor, he fell and, had left my mom, and we had divorced. The whole family was in disarray. And I remember the bitterness and the rage I had, just like everything that I wanted to be. And I thought it was just gone. The foundation was gone. And I remember coming to that point of just didn't talk to him for years. It was like, I don't want you in my life. I don't want to speak to you. And then roundabout way, the Lord leads me down this trail of forgiving my father.
Wow.
And what it looks like to really humbly realize that he's a man on a journey, and going to him and forgiving him, and the security of a father is willing to just forgive your kid, whether it's your father, your sister, whatever. It's like, if you look at a secure father, it's like he doesn't really care what the kid's doing. He doesn't need to say, I need your forgiveness. Like, it's like, no, he's fine with the kid. And it's like, for me to look at my dad, like, even though he was my father, it's like I had to father my father and go through and be willing to do the hard things so that we could live a life of freedom, not this, like, who deserves what. And it's been a beautiful
That's amazing
thing. So,
because my father got saved in my ministry after 30 years of addiction to drugs and alcohol. And then I was like, okay, Dad, you're my natural father, I'm your spiritual father.
Wow.
And you work for me in the ministry. And we
so
traveled
good.
together, and we tried to put together the years of, he took me at 11, 12 years old, Dad, to Hell's Angel biker parties. And, I grew up around all this negative. You got me doing drugs with your drug dealer dad when I was 12 years old, 13. And having to find that restoration. So it's interesting, because I was the man that fell in the sense of, I went through a divorce and ended up getting a remarriage, and I had 3 kids from my previous marriage. So you saying that puts me in the perspective of, you could have been one of my kids, in the sense of, but my kids didn't embrace the bitterness. They found the love and the grace.
Wow.
And they could have been bitter with me, or bitter with the fact that I fell, and I had to go through restoration. That's an interesting story there, that you're on the flip side.
Yeah, man, it's awesome. And I wouldn't have it any other way. It's like, the man I am today and the father I get to be is because of the hard decisions and doors I've had to walk through.
That's great.
And, I wouldn't change it for the world.
Wow.
Awesome.
That's brutally real and honest. And that's what we don't get to see in the church, or in a lot of ministry pulpits.
Yeah.
Because we're too constructed around the sermon, or too constructed around the whatever performance we're putting on.
Yeah, man. It's awesome.